You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with the journalist and broadcaster Jenny Kleeman and the PR consultant Alex Deane. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, the Metro leads with record-breaking figures from the Office for National Statistics, suggesting that 2.5 million people in the UK are too sick to work. On that same story, the Mail has the headline, "Working from home fuels UK's sick note crisis." According to the Express, Rishi Sunak is making the case for reforming the European Court of Human Rights' power to block British deportation flights to Rwanda. The Guardian reports that ministers are considering removing basic housing protections from asylum seekers in a drive to get them out of hotels. The Eye has news of 2 new cases of bird flu in the UK, but says that there's no evidence of human-to-human transmission. The Financial Times carries comments from the chief executive of the artificial intelligence firm ChatGPT, who's told the US Congress he's worried AI could be used to disrupt next year's American elections. The Times reports on Sir Keir Starmer vowing to make Labour the party of house building by relaxing planning restrictions and allowing more homes to be built on the Green Belt. And The Star warns its readers not to use cheeky emojis when looking for love online. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Jenny Kleeman and Alex Deane. Welcome to both of you. Let us start with the Metro and their bold headline, 2.5 million sick notes. To what is this being attributed, Jenny?
Well, this is being attributed to the pandemic. The sick notes that are being handed in are for conditions like back pain, neck pain, poor mental health, post-viral fatigue. And anyone who has spent the past few years hunched over a kitchen table, laptop display, will know that it's not very good for your neck and back. It's also not very good for your mental health to be living as so many of us have been living for the past few years. And the thing is, we are all still getting over the pandemic. There is still very much a hangover from the pandemic of working from home. There is also post-viral fatigue, people who had it, who are dealing with living with COVID. And, you know, there have been big changes to the way we work. I remember the good old days when Alex and I were allowed in the studio, but now we're all working from home, punched in front of our laptops. But yes, these are really serious figures. Of every, it's something like for every 13 people in a job, 1 is unable to work because of long-term sickness. We have NHS backlogs, waiting lists that mean certainly for mental health problems, it takes a very long time for people who are ill with these conditions to be seen, for these conditions to be tackled. And at a time when the leader of both parties is saying that the key to us getting out of the financial crisis that we're in is growth, economic growth. The idea that 1 in 13 of the workforce is unable to work because of long-term sickness is really worrying.
Alex, how worried should we be by these figures? It's up 400,000 since the pandemic.
Yeah, quite significantly, I think, not least because everything Jenny just said was correct about the way we view economic performance. Another way of looking at it is that we've always been less productive as a country than we would like to be. Certainly for the last 2 decades, well before coronavirus, we've been complaining about our lack of productivity, a comparative lack of increased productivity as a country. And this kind of thing just sets the needle on that way back. But, you know, Gillian, there's one other thing about this. We've had all manner of people, lifestyle gurus to leading chief executives, extolling the virtues of working from home as a new liberating life choice. It may be that there's a sting in the tail about that, and we're seeing that play out now. As Jenny rightly says, the conditions that people are talking about in all of the newspapers today are things like neck ache and backache, things that are very often caused by sitting in inappropriate conditions for prolonged periods of time. You're not getting up and talking to your colleagues. You're not going to another meeting room. You're not coming to and fro. You're sitting at your table or at your desk all day long. And who knew? It turns out it's bad for you.
But generally, do people like working from home, though, Jenny, or at least want the option to be able to choose?
I think very much so. And some of what came out in the reporting today about this is that people are productive when they work from home. By some accounts, they are more productive. And I read something today saying that it doesn't stifle creativity, which I think is very strange, because I don't think it's very conducive to creativity to be going back-to-back meetings. But yes, people want the flexibility of being able to work from home. And now that they've seen that it's possible, they want to make sure that can continue. But yeah, we have to make sure that we're doing it in a way that doesn't make people suffer physically and mentally. And actually drilling down on some of the detail in these figures, it's very interesting that it's younger people who are living with mental health problems that prevent them from working. It's older people who are off sick because of heart conditions and back and neck conditions. We have to think about this. If this is now a fact of how we live, we need to be able to address these issues the same way that an employer or HR would look at your setup in the office and make sure it was optimal. They're going to need to think about your setup of working from home and making sure that you're getting what you need in order to be mentally and physically healthy.
And Alex, according to the Mail, which reminds us that part of the story is people dealing with the effects of long COVID.
Yeah, that's a very fair point. The last piece of the puzzle is those, and probably most of your viewers will know at least one person who's suffering from long COVID. Part of the challenge for those trying to work out the future of our economy is how long COVID is. We talk about trying to attract retirees back to recent retirees back to work. We talk about the difference in changing pension arrangements to lure surgeons coming back. Those things are quantifiable. How long will long COVID be a condition? Is it, heaven forbid, is it the rest of your life? Or is it something that someone gets better from over time, gradually? I certainly know both sufferers and employers will be hoping that it's the latter, that people recover from COVID over time and we'll see people back and healthy at work.
Yeah, still unanswered questions still with COVID, aren't there? Let's move on to the Express and this story with the Prime Minister. Well, he's probably on his way back now from Iceland, but they're really pushing for greater powers for deportation and making his case to the EU. Jenny.
Well, yes, he was talking at a meeting of the Council of Europe, and it was about these deportation orders, these pajama orders, they're called. It's trying to stop these, I think they're called Rule 39. It's used to block deportation flights at the last minute, and they're called pajama orders because judges get woken up in the middle of the night and told that they must stop these flights to Rwanda because they contravene the European Convention on Human Rights. Rishi Sunak wants us to be able to get around this and to be able to deport people to Rwanda. I feel very uneasy about this. I think it's a slippery slope when you start opting out of certain amounts of human rights legislation. I think the European Convention on Human Rights is incredibly important, and we were instrumental in setting it up. And when I see things like this, I always think, we're better than this. We shouldn't have to change human rights laws in order to protect our borders. But that's clearly not what the government thinks. There are many other things on the agenda at the Council of Europe meeting, and not least of which Ukraine. But this is what Rishi Sunak is really pushing for. I think his spokespeople were saying that he had some success, some traction at these talks, although obviously some of the leaders there, certainly some leaders from the Icelandic delegation, were saying that they had no interest in changing Rule 39 at all.
Yes, we read that the Prime Minister told the group that his government would not rest until we stop the boat. So very emphatic about the message and the changes that perhaps he wants to see, Alex.
Yeah, you talked about it at the beginning of that as if it was an EU story. Of course, this is the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, which is not related to our membership of the past membership of the European Union, albeit a lot of the decision makers are the same. So it may appear to be a distinction without a difference. But it's not an EU body, it's not the ECJ. And actually, I think if you look at the headlines we're talking about here, even those people who disagree with the Prime Minister's position and the government's position about deportation to Rwanda might be willing to concede that he's got a point about procedure and process. Because in the hearings that we're talking about, as this front page that we've been seeing sets out, the hearings are, one, set late at night with almost no notice to the member states concerned, and two, are, in the paper's pejorative terms, secret. Well, let's just agree that they're closed. That is to say, it's not open and transparent justice in a way that people would expect issues of genuine substantive policy difference to be debated. So actually, I think the Prime Minister may have more friends on that point than people expect, even if people go on to disagree with him on the substance about whether or not you should be able to send people to Rwanda. I think the process by which an international court tells a member state that signed up to it that they've got something wrong, the idea that process should be transparent is, I think, something a lot of people can agree with.
Jenny, take us into this story in The Guardian, saying that ministers are to remove basic housing protections from asylum seekers under new rules designed to move tens of thousands out of hotels.
Yes, The Guardian has got wind of some plans put forward by the Housing Secretary, Michael Gove, and the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, to allow private landlords to house asylum seekers, and they will not have to register. They wouldn't need to have HMO licenses. They wouldn't have to register with local authorities. And this would give them exemptions from certain rules, electrical safety rules, minimum room sizes. And this is, of course, because of the pressure of the cost of housing so many thousands of asylum seekers in hotels. I would argue that the answer to that is to process them quickly and to deal with the backlog in the Home Office, not to subject people who are seeking asylum in this country to housing standards that are lower than what we consider acceptable for human beings. We have to house people in conditions that we see as fit for human occupation. The problem is to clear the backlog rather than lower our standards. This is all about the numbers. It is about the government being able to say that they have removed people from hotels. But in order to do that, I would say we need to do it in a humane way. We shouldn't be lowering our standards in order to do that. We need to treat these people as human beings the way that we would treat any other human beings in this country.
OK. Jenny, thank you. Alex is nodding, but we're not going to have time to go to him before the break. We will come right back to you on many other stories coming up. Could AI disrupt the next US election? That's on the front of the FT. We'll discuss that and more next. Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, Jenny Kleeman and Alex Deane. Let's have a look at The Guardian and this story about Kyiv repelling defences from Russia. This is after an attack on Kyiv, one of the biggest assaults since last year. Alex.
Yeah, we've got good on The Guardian for putting this on the front page. And some people will feel that they are Ukrained out. And we've got to keep talking about this and talk about Russia's totally unjustified invasion of Europe's biggest country, of its ongoing atrocities inflicted on a people who did nothing to deserve what's happening. And now we see Putin thrashing ground, increasingly desperate, I think it would seem, in the face of the setbacks that he and his armed forces have suffered, and just dropping bombs on civilians in Ukraine's capital. It's wrong. We've known it's wrong for a very long time. We've got to keep saying it's wrong until it stops. Yes,
Ukraine claiming to have neutralised the Kremlin's most potent hypersonic weapon. Jenny.
Yes, and this is, of course, symbolically incredibly important for Ukrainians. And the fact that Kyiv, facing such an onslaught, relentless, following Zelensky's trip to Europe, managed to really repel a very serious arsenal of weapons. As Alex says, the Kremlin is getting desperate. We had a very scaled down Victory Day parade. We had those very strange reports a couple of weeks ago about attacks on the Kremlin, which either look like Ukraine is able to get weapons very, very close to Moscow, or it looks like, you know, there are sort of desperate false flag operations taking place there. Goodness knows what's going on in Putin's. Alex is absolutely right. He is reckoning on a weariness among Ukraine's allies, and for the money to cease to flow to Ukraine, and for and I know this is what Donald Trump wants. Is, you know, Donald Trump says he could end the war in a day, and that would be by basically forcing Ukraine to cede land to Moscow. We can't allow that. This is a completely outrageous invasion, and you know, they just have to keep on keeping on, and we have to keep on caring about it. So it's a good thing that it's on the front page.
Let's move on to the Financial Times, Alex, and this story about ChatGPT. Their chief executive, Sam Altman, appearing before Congress and actually requiring more regulation, which is quite unusual for someone who's created the technology to be actually saying we need more regulation.
That's right. It was a very enlightening session in giving evidence, and anyone lucky enough to have seen your piece with Matt before we came on air will have seen that this is an unusual position taken by a chief executive. I suppose there are two different kinds of stories you can have with this kind of robots take over the world headline. The first is chief executive says everything's fine, so you say how deluded they are, and the other one is the chief executive says, yes, you're right, they're actually going to take over everything and we should be worried about it, and you say, gosh, we were right, all these things are terrible. And this was option B. This is the business that invented the chat.ai business concern, saying you're right, it may well become an issue of significance and something to worry about, not least as has been set out in a number of the pieces. These computers are increasingly thinking like we do. They're able to rationalize, reason, and give answers and display what in other circumstances might be considered to be emotion. But I suppose the most proximate thing that the Americans are thinking about, this being their focus, and let's not be unfair, it matters for the world, so it's an understandable focus, is the presidential election coming up, and people asking chatbots, chat.ai, what do you think about the election that's forthcoming? The answers to that will be very important for the next presidential election.
Yes, indeed. And Sam Altman saying that when Photoshop came onto the scene a long time ago, for a while, people were really quite fooled by Photoshopped images, and then pretty quickly developed an understanding that images might be Photoshopped. This will be like that, but on steroids. So certainly concerns about the implications for the US elections, Jenny.
Yes, I mean, gosh, I think that's a terrible comparison to make, because what Sam Altman went on to say is, you know, we've now become quite canny about Photoshop and how images can be altered. But we've also become quite canny about the damage that Photoshop can do in terms of normalizing certain body images or certain kinds of plastic surgery and inflated lips and unrealistic body sizes. It's actually done quite a lot of damage. I think we need to put this in context here. There is a very large number of very senior entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley, including Elon Musk, who signed a letter, 1,000 of them signed a letter calling on the development of AI to be stopped. And what Sam Altman is saying is, against the backdrop of that kind of backlash, he's not saying we should stop what we're doing. He's saying there should be regulation. He said there should be warnings like there is on nutritional labels of food. I think basically he wants license to continue. He wants to make sure that there is the legitimate skepticism that there should be. But I don't think he's necessarily doing this out of any desire to save the world. He's doing this out of a desire to save his business and save his job. And yes, you know, it'll be very worrying if this can interfere with elections. It's got enormous potential, but we do need to make sure that whatever restrictions and regulations are there are global, because it doesn't matter what we decide we're going to do. If Russia and North Korea doesn't care, they're going to carry on technology.
Jenny and Alex, thank you so much.